Hello and welcome to this edition of Tips and Tricks. Now today I'm going to be talking about missing the bite. And I have a couple examples of this and what I actually sort of mean by missing the bite and ways you might be able to correct from missing the bite to being on the bite. But missing the bite is, well, basically it's something that it seems obvious that they should be on something, but for some reason they're not. And instead of experimenting and going somewhere else and missing a bite that might be really hot, well, you miss it because you don't experiment with things. All right, let me just move into examples. I just put on recently that show, The Twitch It Shad. And you saw that bite. I mean, that bite was red hot. And the reality is, when that bite was red hot for that Twitch It Shad, I couldn't get him on our little stick bait, the gotcha stick or the drop stick. Couldn't get him on a jig. Couldn't get him on a spinner bait. Any other kind of surface lure. They were hot on that bite. And, you know, they were chasing and the fish were chasing and it seemed obvious. Well, towards the end of that, and a couple days later, after filming that show, I got there. Same thing. They were chasing everywhere. I was throwing the Twitch It Shad. I caught 3 fish. And it was a fish, and then like 15 minutes later a fish, and then 15 minutes later a fish. Nothing like it been. Yet it all seemed the same. They were still chasing, they were going crazy. But a couple of my friends were there, and they actually caught a couple of fish on a Carolina rig on a plastic worm. I'm like, wow, you know, in the morning when they've been doing this, they haven't been touching anything plastic. Well, I switched. I'm like, maybe there's obviously another bite going on that I'm missing at the moment. Threw on our little green pumpkin gotcha dropping stick, flicking, 10 fish in a half hour. And then caught a few more until the sun got up and the bite died. But the reality is, it just didn't seem like an obvious bite. I mean, they hadn't been on it. Everything seemed the same. But if I wouldn't have seen somebody or just thought suddenly like, well, let me just try this, what the hell, I would have missed that bite. Well, the other example is Tackle Warehouse, a blog with, I think, Brian Thrift, in the fall. Sort of the same situation on Clear Lake. Fish active everywhere, fish chasing. Well, he did what you'd think he would do. He started using active baits and things through the water column, from jerk baits to cranks to spinner baits. Couldn't get much going at all. Suddenly he threw on a jig, which you wouldn't think of throwing a jig when the fish are everywhere around you chasing. And he had a heyday. I mean, he caught so many fish and had so much fun, and he was just popping it off the bottom. So there you go. 2 examples and things to look for. Instead of them being active and you're throwing an active bait, it might be the opposite. Like, you think they should be slow and you're crawling the jig and can't get anything. Suddenly you try an active bait, something coming through the water, something a little faster, and you might find yourself catching them. So there you go. Missing the bite. It's just, when it seems obvious, sometimes just try something that, well, it's not so obvious. Just go, you know, they shouldn't be on this, but let me give it a try. Because it might go from nothing to a lot of something. I hope this helps. Until next time.
All right. After the FLW, I'm coming here to shore. And I catch this big boy. It's probably about a 4.5. Might be a 5. See what happens when it's not tournament day. So I just threw out there in this little spot, about 5 feet from shore. I caught this big boy. A little 4-inch gotcha stick, flicking it just the way it was in the tournament. Well, at least I did catch one big Clear Lake bass.